Bulavinaka, everybody. Welcome back to our podcast, Digressions of a Fijian. This is episode 4, and I'm Isabella, and I'll be your host for this podcast. For those of you who have just joined us, welcome. And those of you who are following us already, welcome as well. So today's podcast is going to be on technology and how our experiences for our children and our family, and also just our views on the use of technology today. So sit back and I hope you enjoy our episode. So technology, why this topic? Why technology? Well, to open up the conversation, I'll bring it back to our family. We have 3 kids and it's 2019. So technology is very much part and parcel of their everyday lives. We have apps for almost everything we do, and there's a heavy reliance on technology, you could say, for maximizing output on any work that they do. And I guess you could also say it applies to society at large. It's easy to get carried away pontificating on why we must allow for the natural process, you could say, for technology in our children's lives. But I feel going in that hard and in such a dogmatic way would actually disable us, in a sense. We'd be doing our children a massive injustice with regards to preparing them on how to use technology responsibly and also how to maximize the benefit for them, be it academically, professionally, or even as I do on a personal development level with this podcast and my blog, which consequently has led to my being able to work as a freelance writer, and ties in well with our army life, life schedule, I guess you could say, where it's a lot easier for me to work from home. There's no denying that there is a tremendous advantage to our children accessing technology. For example, all 3 have been introduced at early stages to learning apps that have improved their hand and eye coordination through interactive learning. Now, improving hand and eye coordination, I know it's probably unfair to put it down to the apps. We do a lot of outdoor activities as well that helps in that development stage for them too. But the tying it into the theme for today, which is technology apps, have the learning apps that they have utilized have really helped massively too. Another way that the advantage of utilizing technology in the appropriate manner, it's like language skills, apps that would allow for them to learn new words and phrases in a language besides English. Linking it back to hand and eye coordination, also the apps also allow for cognitive development. Obviously, again, by using appropriate apps, it can provide basic reading, writing, and even math skills. I'll even go as far to say that these technological tools, by way of apps, also encourage problem-solving skills. There's research that shows that young children engage effectively on games because they're more interested in achieving short-term goals. So playing these games allows them to think about what the next steps will be and how it'll affect the result of the game. It encourages logical thinking and decision-making skills. I think decision-making skills is really important for those of us that come from, Pacifica communities and also minority ethnic backgrounds. I say decision-making skills and from our own background, because I feel like our communities are ones where we are taught to be reserved, I guess, and respect our elders. So a lot of the decisions are made for us from a very young age up until young adulthood. So then by the time we get to the point in our life where we are on our own and having to make decisions for ourselves, we tend to doubt the decisions we make, and it impacts our quality of life massively. And so I think these kind of apps sort of lays the foundation on how to, what's the word for it, how to make decisions and analyze what the outcomes could be. I guess analytical thinking. Yeah, that's the word I was thinking of. And yeah, so today I have Neville here with me, and we're going to be talking about our experience as parents, how our different opinions on technology and the role it plays with our children. Welcome back, Neville. It's always great to have you on the podcast. As I said in the intro to the podcast, today's theme or today's topic is about technology and how it sort of impacts our children's lives. When I say impacts, I think impacts is maybe a negative word to use. That's how they utilize it in their everyday lives.
That's right.
Yeah. So, technology is such a generalized subject. Bosh, if we were to talk about technology, would be here all night. So we've narrowed it down to how we, what restrictions, sort of methods that we put in place with regards to our children and screen time, and also social media. Yeah. So, what are your thoughts on screen time for our kids? I already know. I want you to share it with our audience. What are your thoughts on screen time?
I think it's absolutely essential as parents, because as most of you are aware, it's quite addictive, and it's amazing how we will justify the use or the the excessive use of this technology, especially screen time. I certainly speak from experience. You stare at a screen, and then before you know it, an hour has gone by, and you haven't really realized how much time that has been taken away from you.
Yeah, and so how does that tie in with the kids being able to access technology? Because some might argue, well, we live in a day and age where technology is part and parcel of everyday life, and they need it because of school.
Yeah, it's absolutely necessary.
Yeah.
But on you've got two ends of the spectrum. You've got one where you remove all restraint.
Yeah.
Just free for all. Spend as much time as you want, no limitation.
Yeah.
And then you've got the other extreme where you've kind of just locked everything away, and the child can't have access to to technology in that sense, with utilizing screens.
Yeah. I guess that's the scary extreme, isn't it? Because children are naturally curious.
Yeah, pretty much becoming an Amish person, right?
Oh my goodness. I'm not even going to address what you just said.
Yeah, because you don't use any technology at all. That's it. But
isn't that what Kylie said we were?
Yeah.
Kylie's my Welsh friend who likes to wind us up.
But then, there's, for ourselves, we kind of in the middle, having the balance. And, that's the essential part, is having that balance as parents.
Yeah. Having
the control, and you have to be in control, as a parent, because if you factor in what your child can be potentially exposed to, that is, there's that tablet or that screen is an actual gateway. It's a door to your child's mind, and there's many positive things you can fill in there, but equally there's a lot of bad things that they can fill in their minds.
Yeah. And I mean, with us, we use technology to our advantage by having apps that can actually set age limits. We have 3 kids who are, the age range is between 3 to 15. So the content that each of them consumes is completely different. So, what the 3-year-old might enjoy watching, the 8-year-old will not necessarily want to watch, or the 15-year-old. I'd be very surprised if Va wants to watch what Levi is watching. But then again, she sits there with him, doesn't she?
Yeah, that's right.
But, like we've had mixed reactions from friends when we tell them that we have these restrictions in place, haven't we? And
Yeah.
what was the term you used? The ones that don't agree with us think that it's...
Yeah, I think it's like, quite draconian.
Yeah. Having to filter the content. It's not that we stop them from using,
No, absolutely not. We recognize as parents that is essential to to their education.
Yeah.
But at the same time, as parents, we do recognize the dangers that are involved with uncontrolled use.
Yeah.
And it is absolutely essential that we put in these control measures to ensure that the children are, are protected. Really.
How has it helped you having access to the internet as a young adult, and now knowing what the internet is capable of as a parent? Like, do you think it's helped you? Because I didn't have access to the internet until I started uni. I didn't even have an email address. I was terrible. I typed in my email address on where you're supposed to type in the web page.
Yeah.
Because I didn't know how to access. I had a Hotmail account then, and then I've obviously learned. I feel like I spend too much time on the internet, but it's having that knowledge, I guess, for me. Like, how do you think it's helped you having sort of a bit of knowledge to know what measures to put in place? Do you think it's helped you being aware, I guess? Yeah.
Yeah, for me, mainly it's mainly from mistakes.
Yeah.
Because again,
what do you mean?
we've had no one there to actually tell us.
Right.
So it's more the lessons I've learned are purely from experience.
Yeah.
That's what I mean.
Okay.
And that's what we're doing. Especially with time consumption.
Yeah.
I've wasted so much time.
Yeah.
Just looking on. You start on YouTube looking for some educational video, and the next thing you know,
you're watching cat videos.
Yeah, you're watching cat videos, or you're watching like this compactor machine, watching how it can just smash whatever type of object.
Yeah, I mean, I'm guilty of that as well. We were just, before we started recording this podcast, Nev was saying, "Oh, this takes up a lot of time for you to edit and get the topic and sort of have some sort of script to be able to just start the conversation off." And then he sort of laughed and looked at me and said, "But to be honest, I think you spend a lot more time on your phone." And he's right, because I'll be writing down sort of a train of thought and committing it to paper, because I'm still old-fashioned that way. Like, I have to write something down, and then the ideas build up on that. And then I might think of like a talk that I've heard or something I've read, an article, and I'll pick up my phone and try and access it, and I'll read the article, and then there'll be suggestions at the bottom, and any links. And the thing is, like, because we know how those clicks work, we know what to avoid as well, because sometimes those links are not good.
Right. Yeah.
And so this is, it leads us back to why we have restrictions in place for our children and the content that they can access. I sometimes I'm shocked, I guess, for want of a better word, at some of like parents that we're friends with who I'll go over with, like my 8-year-old, for example. We'll visit like friends who have similar aged kids, and they'll have a tablet, and the kids are like, what they're accessing, like, for me as a parent, is not age appropriate. And like, how do you have a conversation with your child who's like sitting there, and the friend that she's visiting has like a device where they're accessing like websites or accessing games that are not age appropriate? Because I don't know if it's the ignorance on the parents' part, not knowing that there are things that they measures that they need to put in place with a particular app. So I always find it hard for me having that conversation, or Like, how do you deal with that as a parent? Like, if you were put in that situation, what would you do?
Well, for me, I'd just quite simply tell my child,
Yeah.
I have no responsibility in that sense, for someone else's child. But what I do have responsibilities for my child.
Yeah.
And regardless of which environment we're in, if we're in at someone else's house, that's not like a license for your kid to just do whatever they want then.
Yeah.
Although they do take advantage of that, don't they?
They try it, yeah.
Yeah, and that's
kids.
That's kids, and it's all part of disciplining them. And that's the key thing, really. It's the discipline.
Before I started this podcast, I'll admit I had a bit of fear, because I feel like there might be backlash on how people might perceive the way that we parent when it comes to this kind of access. Yeah? Like you said, we've had friends who disagree with it because they think it's draconian, but at the same time, there has been a lot of sort of positive feedback as well, because some parents whose children are the same age as our eldest have actually told us, like, I wish I had done this earlier. I wish I had done what you guys have done with your children earlier, because now I have no control, which is sad, like you're talking 14, 15-year-olds whose parents feel helpless about what their children are accessing.
Yeah.
On phones and devices that parents are paying for. I don't know if it maybe
yeah, that always still baffles me. It's like, inside I'm thinking, you're the parent,
yeah.
Take control of, you're in control.
Yeah.
And if you're still paying for the phone bills,
yeah.
if the child is still living in your house, you have that responsibility.
Yeah.
And that's the keyword, is you have that responsibility to make sure that that you're educating them, and it is a big part of their education.
Yeah.
The discipline.
I think also, like, what helps the two of us is our maybe like the way that we were brought up and I'm not trying to make it seem like it was better, but I think it's like the culture that we were brought up in. So there's still that sort of respect. Yeah. So we parent with like the values, the principles and the values that we were brought up with, and also things that we've learned as adults. And Nev and I are Christian, so we sort of what? Nev just made a face at me when I said that. I think he thinks I shouldn't be calling myself that.
No, I didn't say that.
No, so we also apply Christian values to our teachings. And at the end of the day, whether it's Christian or any other religion, it's also about just having some sort of faith-based teaching in the way you parent, because it gives them that sort of, like you said, the three things that you said. What are the three pillars, which are maturity?
All right, the emotional maturity, and the spiritual, the physical maturity as well.
So the physical is something that you're able to see.
Yeah, it's the more the biological sort of development.
Yeah.
The children, the teenagers, physically,
they look like they're adults, and they can handle whatever it is that they're accessing.
But when you think about them emotionally, they're still very immature. And I mean, if they don't develop emotionally from the teenage years, they'll grow up literally as
emotionally mature.
Emotionally immature.
Yeah, and it sort of impacts on how they make decisions, life decisions. And I guess it sort of ties into what I had said about how we can use apps appropriately at young age. And I was talking about like how children, like we can utilize games, educational games, age appropriate, where the children, it encourages logical thinking and decision making. And I had said that because of the culture that we as Pacific communities come from, the the cultural background that we come from, we are brought up in a way where decisions are made for us from a young age up until young adult age. So when we do move out of home eventually, some of us don't have that emotional maturity to be able to make decisions. Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. Like having using technology in a way, you just lay a foundation on how you're able to sort of think logically. It plays like a role in it though, and I understand like parenting comes into play, education comes into play, into building layers of that. But just having like using technology in a positive way can also help towards the emotional maturity.
Yeah, there's also the other side where it's used as a babysitting tool.
Yeah, I mean,
and
I'm guilty of that.
Yeah, the justification about leaving your child with a screen so you can go off and do whatever you want or have this undisturbed time.
I feel like this is a side swipe. Yeah. I mean, I'm definitely guilty of that. Like I'll want to do something. I'll need to clean the house. And then I'll go, hey, Levi, do you want to watch he watches this weird man. He's called Blippy. He wears orange braces. But, it's an educational show.
Right.
And so I'd put on, and it'll be 40 minutes though.
Yeah.
And so I'll be able to finish whatever it is I need to do before that shows up. But just like enjoying that bit of peace and quiet, because he's 3 and he's hyper and he likes to be in your face and everything. So I totally get what you mean.
Yeah, it's there are times when it would be useful, but it is quite addictive in itself.
Yeah,
that in itself, the ease of being able to,
as a young child as well, it's harder for them to be able to control how much that because for them it's just like, oh, I like this and I want to use it. So Nev, for our audience, because again, I know what your stance is with this, with regards to, a few parents, some parents might say like, well, where's the boundaries in terms of like us respecting our teenagers' privacy? Right. With communicating with her friends, being able to access the internet for content, age-appropriate content, and like what's your thoughts on that?
In relation to privacy?
Yeah, like emails or text messages or just communicating with her friends, and how, because we have those restrictions. Oh, for example, our 15-year-old, I don't know if I might even venture out and say she's probably one of the very few 15-year-olds who doesn't have a smartphone.
Yeah.
Nev and I are of the school of thought that unless you can pay for a smartphone, there's no, there isn't a need for it.
Yeah.
Like, she does have a phone, but it serves the purpose of.
It's only when she goes out. As a form of communication with us. It's mainly for her protection, really. That's the only time she'd get it.
I mean, she's like
she's quite tech savvy. She's more tech savvy than me. So it's not like
she's a naive 15-year-old who doesn't know how to, like, for example, the Snapchats. I have an account, but on my account is just my cousins, my friends actually, I might say, who are actually my cousins, and we just send pictures to each other. So again, there's like that restriction methods that we've utilized to be able to allow them to use apps, but not use apps where there's like total strangers on the other side.
That's right, yeah.
And then also with regards to smartphones, there's so many incidents of young people being cyberbullied, and if we as parents feel like if we are able to protect her just for a little bit more time before she's off to the big bad world, we'll do that as well, And like the computer.
Yeah, exactly. I always tell tell my daughters, there's a reason why the people who invent these social media sites are not actually account holders, because they
don't use it.
Yeah, they know how addictive it is, and just how influential it is on your thinking, and you mentioned something about cyberbullying. It's a completely different world to what we've been brought up in, because for teenagers nowadays that is their reality. And I'm not saying just teenagers,
they're adults
the adults as well. They've all grown up in that age where the social media world is their reality, and that you just have to make your for us, we have to make our children aware of this, because if you kind of just go in with the flow in that sense, it can really change your life for the worse.
Like social media, I use social media a lot. Nev doesn't necessarily use social networking sites. I think you use LinkedIn more, but that's for like professional networking.
That's right, yeah.
He follows me on Twitter though, which makes me a bit anxious at times, because he'll text me and ask me to do something, and I'll be like, oh, I'm very busy, and then I'm fighting with someone on Twitter and then I forget that he's following me, and then he'll just like casually like a tweet just to tell me that.
You're like a stalker.
The very people that we want our kids. But social media, it can be used. Like I use it to keep in contact with family. We send pictures, like the distance. And our children are aware of it. They're aware of the advantage. And then we're also very open in the sense like we have conversations about the negative impact of social media, and how much information is too much information. Like we've got two girls and our youngest is a boy, and in this day and age where the way society sort of how shall I put it, pressures young girls and women into thinking that you have to be portrayed in a certain manner or portrayed in a certain way, which is like, it's great for those who are like body confident, but it's not so great for those who might feel pressured into being someone that they're not, And so like we're big on self-respect, self-love, and social media sort of like cuts to the core of that and tries to destroy it,
The problem with social media though is it's given every person out there a mouthpiece, so you'll never be able to keep everyone happy. There's always going to be someone out there.
I guess it's a bit unfair for me to use it as a villain, because it's not social media, it's the person behind the screen, isn't it? And also like I had an interesting conversation with a friend of mine on Twitter, and we were talking about, because there was this video circulating. I didn't see it. There was a video circulating of, actually no, it wasn't a video. It was a guy who had shared his high school experience, and it was an high school experience of group sex.
Right. And
he more or less outed himself for doing something to a young minor that wasn't right. But he was a minor as well. And then, so obviously everybody that was involved in the act was under the legal age. And but the conversation that we had was, I said to him, I was like, I feel like I'm going to speak from the Fijian perspective. I feel like the conversations are not being had at home with regards to important things like reproductive health, sexual health, things that are important. And like, for me, I'm going to be honest, it was awkward for me to have that conversation with our eldest. Nev stepped in, especially when he had my introduction to it, was like, well, you know how boys have balls, and he's just like, yeah, you know what, I'm going to take over. Because I never had the conversation. I never had the conversation. And we were talking about it like, because teenagers are just naturally curious creatures. Some of them will turn to social media, some of them will turn to the internet to find out information about things that should be conversations that parents are having with them. And that's the danger of it.
Yeah. It's more building that really strong relationship with your children, to be approachable, because I've always mentioned this to Bella, is that at home is what you have control of. Once they step outside of the house, they go into school and all those pressures, you have no control of that really. What they're exposed to, what they're bombarded with every day. So it's kind of like training them up, to almost like a soldier really, to go out and do battle in that world.
That's sad though.
Yeah, I know.
That's how parenting has to be today.
Yeah, but then this is like opening a can of worms, because parents have given that responsibility of education to the teachers in the schools. That you go there, you educate them, but the reality is education starts at home. It starts with the family. And how you teach them up, not just to become academically smart or whatever like that, but really to be good people, to be good citizens, to help others.
I mean, that's always my biggest fear. It's like, because we have girls, there's a lot more pressure from society on how they should act, how they should look, what they should do, and even down to like the way they dress, and like there might even be pressures to do things that they might not feel comfortable doing, and that's what really scares me. And also young boys and young men as well have the same pressures, and I think there's not enough conversation around that as well, that they face the same pressures as well. Like it sort of brings us back to how I think parents need to be more aware of what are the advantages, what are the disadvantages, what are the dangers of exposing our children, I guess. But at the same time, like you said, being emotionally... did I just have an accent there? Being emotionally mature.
Yes.
Being emotionally mature, preparing them to be able to know, actually, this is not right for me. Might be right for their friends, but it's not right for them.
Right. Yeah, just equipping them with the moral values that they can really go out there. They're armed to the teeth in that sense. So they can know how to deal with everything, success, failure. Because that is life, isn't it?
That's true.
But it seems like we live in a society now where it teaches more how to see the obstacles rather than the blessings that you have in your life. Just look, and if I tell my children that you get to where you are because of the effort and the work that you put in. You don't get there. If you don't make it there, then you just don't go looking around pointing at people or a finger to blame. Certainly here in the UK. It's a first world nation.
No, that's true. Well, it's been an interesting chat. Good chat here in the studio in our very bright living room. Thanks again for joining us, Nev. Guys, if you have any questions for us with regards to this podcast, or any questions or any ideas, any suggestions on what topics you'd like us to talk about, while Neville is still keen on helping me out with my podcast, feel free to send me a message on any of my social media accounts, on either Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook. Right. And it's on Fijian in the UK. You can find me just on that username, Fijian in the UK. And thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Pleasure to be here.
For those of you who have just joined us for the first time, you can follow my blog on www.fijianintheuk.com. You can also find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook on the username Fijian in the UK. Our music today has been from filmmusic.io by Kevin MacLeod. It's called Cheery Monday. My podcast cover art is by Dom. Thank you so much, Dom, for putting up with all my questions and coming up with an amazing cover art. So I'll see you all on our next episode. Bye.